So again, a little bit of a different offer practice today. Like I'm giving you the answers right now. But what I encourage everyone to do is still go in, draft these in zip forms as you would an offer and still send it to me for practice. And I can give feedback. So our subject property is 4988 North 60th Street, and I'm just gonna go into MLS and I'll just bring it up. Can you guys see MLS still?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So this is a 3-bed, 1-bath house in Milwaukee. And it went on the market a few days ago, about a week and change ago, or not even a week. But list price is $179,900. Some information about the house. It's in the city, so it's on municipal water, municipal sewer. The municipality type is city. So I'm not going to go into a ton of details here, but what I want to focus on is some private remarks. So offers to be presented as received, seller's ideal closing scenarios ASAP, square footage and room size is not verified by agent or broker, and then electronic earnest money is encouraged. So what I did was I called the listing agent, I called Ross and pretended like I was interested in purchasing, or my buyer was interested in purchasing the home and writing an offer. So I called him up and I said, okay, Ross, just wanted to see if you can give us some insights or further preferences that maybe what the seller's looking for to help make our offer super duper attractive. So if I go over to the offer practice sheet, I'm going to show you this. So after calling the listing agent, he confirmed, and we'll go back to MLS in a second, that there's not a condition report. So this is an out-of-town seller who has never lived in the home. They used it as an investment property. It sounds like the seller is actually pretty motivated. The seller is offering cooperative compensation to the buyer's agent of 2.4%. And he confirmed that that should be written into the offer. And that the only thing beyond like the closing date of ASAP, which was put in MLS, he did indicate like in terms of review time, 24 hours for binding acceptance was acceptable. So I'm going to go back to MLS because that helps us fill in some of the gaps. But if you see here, like he indicated the seller was offering concessions. So again, perfect opportunity for you to pick up the phone and clarify with the listing agent as to what that exactly means. And then we're just going to go into documents. And the only document that they provided was a lead paint disclosure because the house was built in 52. The seller was required to provide a lead paint addendum, but the seller did not provide a condition report because he did not live in the home. So you'll see how that kind of changes our offer a little bit. I'm going to go back to this Google Doc and we're going to talk a little bit about our buyer. Does anyone know who Malik Willis is? This is an actual person. Anybody? Lydia, do you know who Malik is?
No.
No. Okay. Malik Willis is Jordan Love's backup quarterback.
Oh.
So Malik Willis is starting for the Packers on Sunday. So I just thought it'd be fun to bring Malik in. So you're helping Malik, and his closing time frame is flexible. He does want to have a home inspection and a radon inspection, especially knowing that there isn't a condition report. I would strongly encourage, if not say you mandatory, Mr. Buyer, you need to have a home inspection. He has $5,000 in cash that he can use right away for earnest money, as well as if we want to have some type of an inspection gap coverage or appraisal gap. And I have a feeling Mr. Malik is probably, if he needed to buy a house, he'd probably be pre-approved for way over $180,000. But for our practice today, he does have a pre-approval And it's an FHA loan. So that was something just a little bit different. So you guys can see how we would just distinguish that in the offer. And he's got 5% down. And right now we're looking at a mortgage rate of 6.5%. So specifically for this offer, and again, I've already filled out the offer. So when we go into zip forms, you'll kind of see some of this information already in there. But for our offer today, we're going to offer asking price. Malik wants all the inclusions and exclusions that are listed in MLS. He's comfortable with a closing date of October 14th. So it's a little bit over 30 days. We're going to be putting 2% down for our earnest money. And typically in this market, earnest money can average anywhere between 1% and 3% of the purchase price. A buyer can certainly go lower than that, and a buyer can certainly go higher than that. But that's typically what our average is in the market. And then because Malik has indicated he wants a home inspection, we're going to write that into the offer. We're going to write a radon inspection into the offer. We're going to give the seller the right to cure. In the seller's market, that's pretty common to give the seller the right to cure. And we know that he had that $5,000 in cash. So 2% for earnest money plus $1,000, we're going to give in an inspection coverage that is within our $5,000 cash reserve. Financing terms are going to be what we stated above. So he's got an FHA loan. He's going to put 5% down and the mortgage rate's going to be 6.5%. He's going to have the appraisal contingency with the seller having the right to cure. And then something that I would also encourage folks to learn a little bit more about, if you haven't already, is home warranties. And we might actually have somebody from America's Preferred Home Warranty come back to productivity coaching on a Thursday to talk about home warranties. But this was something that I thought, like, if this was a real buyer of mine and there wasn't a condition report, I still would have a home inspection. And I might even ask the seller to pay for a 1-year home warranty. So we're going to see how that gets added into the offer. So if everybody is willing and game, and I strongly encourage you to do so, please open up zip forms, practice writing this in. Like, the mystery of what to put in the offer has been taken out. It's all right here on the document for you. But I strongly encourage you guys to still fill out the practice offer, as well as any other corresponding addendums, and send it to me by tomorrow at 11 a.m. So, we'll giving you 24 hours. I actually had the information ahead of time since I sent it yesterday, but send it to me as if I was the listing agent. So give me all of the documents as well as a cover letter, and I will give you feedback. Okay, so I'm just going to go right into zip forms because, again, I've already filled out these documents. This isn't zip form training. It's just basic offer practice. So here we go. So here's our offer. I dated it today. Because we have buyer agency signed with our buyer, with Malik, I have crossed off the agent of seller listing firm and an agent of buyer and seller. He is in fact our client, and therefore we are the agent of the buyer. I added in the address here. It's in the city of Milwaukee. If you aren't quite sure, again, this would be city, village, town. If you're not quite sure what type of municipality the home currently resides in, what you can do is go back to MLS. And there's a section with MLS that indicates what type of municipality it is. So the listing agent would have inputted that into the listing. So we are in the city of Milwaukee. It's the county of Milwaukee. And if you aren't quite sure where the county is, it's also here in MLS towards the top. We are purchasing the home, or we are offering what they were asking. So we're offering $179,000. All you have to do is put it in this line here, and I'll just pretend again. And it would automatically add in the letters or the words to the line above. Included in the purchase price. So this is where, again, you want to make sure that you double check with your buyers. You review what was included in MLS, and you can see that down here, inclusion, so oven, range, and fridge, and Malik said he wanted what was in MLS. If there's actually something else, like maybe there's a fridge in the basement or a second, maybe there's a microwave and it's not listed in an inclusion, you can certainly write it into the offer. Um, you know, this is your opportunity just to make sure that you are crystal clear with what in fact your buyer wants to include and what your buyer actually does not want as an exclusion. So we've listed here what was included in MLS. There's not a ton, so it's only got an oven, range, and a fridge. So there's, to my understanding, no washer, dryer, microwave, things like that. And not included in the purchase price is the seller's personal property. So again, you can find out what's excluded in MLS as well. In terms of binding acceptance, so again, this is our deadline that we are asking the seller to review and to accept our offer by. And when we called the listing agent, and again, this was in the offer practice instructions, the listing agent indicated that they only needed 24 hours to review. So if we submit it today, I'm just giving it until 11:59 tomorrow on September 12th. If you ever wanted to list a specific time on that date, so deadlines run through 11:59 PM of the date stated. If you ever wanted to just say, you know what, we're only going to give them until 8 PM on whatever, you can do that too. But for our practice today, we'll give them the full day up until 11:59 PM tomorrow. In terms of closing, I just put in here, closing will happen on October 14th. So we knew our buyer had a flexible closing time frame. We knew the seller wanted to close as soon as possible. So this is a little bit over 30 days. If you aren't sure whether or not that closing time frame is feasible, by all means, always pick up the phone and ask the listing agent. You can always say, my buyers are thinking about putting this in as a closing date. Is that acceptable? What you also want to do too is make sure that any other deadlines within the offer that you might need help satisfying, for example, like the home inspection or the financing contingency, you want to make sure that those people that are helping you in those aspects of the contract or of the offer can also make those timeframes. So here we've just listed October 14th. This was already put into the offer as a template, so it's at the place selected by the buyer. So I just crossed off at the place selected by the seller, since that would be a little confusing if we stated both. Make sure that your address then covers or carries over to the second page of the offer. Zip forms, you actually have to re-add this, so it's very easy just to add it in. But once you add it to the second page, it'll actually then automatically carry through to the remaining pages of the document. So we are offering earnest money. And if you recall, we said that out of the $5,000 that Malik had in cash, we were going to offer 2% of earnest, or 2% of the purchase price in earnest money. So 2% of $179,900 is this amount here, $3,598. If I was really writing this, I'd probably round it to like $3,600. But we're going to have that earnest money once the offer is accepted. The buyer will then be delivering that within 5 days after acceptance. All earnest money is going to be held by the listing firm. Now, if you don't know where the money is going to be held, sometimes brokerages might utilize a title company to hold the earnest money. And if that's the case, they usually put that within private remarks or on MLS, so you have some instructions. But if there's nothing listed and you aren't quite sure, it's totally acceptable to call the listing agent and just double check as to where who's going to be holding the earnest money. Usually for a Keller Williams listing, like we, the listing firm, will hold the earnest money. So I'm not going to cover this information here. This is more details as it pertains to what if the deal does not get to closing, what happens if things are canceled, how does earnest money get dispersed. We have many contract trainings on YouTube that talk about these specific sections of the offer. So I would highly encourage you not only to just read through the offer, so you actually know what's included, but if you need some extra help with regards to understanding cancellation, mutual release, and how to get earnest money back, we've got contract trainings. But if you still have additional questions, by all means, feel free to reach out to the helpline or one of our compliance brokers. Okay, so the next section is for the condition report. And by law, a seller is required to fill out a condition report. Now, there are some exceptions to that. One might be the person that is the seller could be a personal representative of a trust and might have never lived in the house. That's an exception. In our case, the seller, while he's owned the property for a little bit, he's not filling out a condition report because he's never lived in it. So typically you would actually put in this line, in line 107, the date of the condition report that was filled out. But because we don't have one, I literally just crossed off this section of the condition report or of the offer. And you'll see I've added then some additional language and additional provisions that states seller's not providing real estate condition report. Now, just because the seller hasn't filled one out doesn't mean you can't have a home inspection. And that's certainly something that, as an agent, you would want to recommend to your buyer in order for them to understand a little bit more about the home that they're purchasing. So at the top of the next page, on page 4, we now get into some of the contingencies that are included with the offer. And the first one is the home inspection. So we checked the box here on line 193, indicating that the offer is contingent upon a Wisconsin registered or Wisconsin licensed home inspector performing a home inspection. Okay. This also includes automatically if the home inspector recommends any follow-up inspections from other types of professionals, like maybe there's some roof questions or basement questions or structural questions. The buyer is allowed to have follow-up inspections that were recommended coming out of that initial home inspection. Now, in terms of the deadline that we are including for this contingency, in line 206 here, I put, we're going to get this done in 12 days. And if you've set in on these offer practices before, or if you've gone through Accelerator, you know that I want people to understand that this date here, this deadline, this does not mean that's when you have to have the home inspection completed by. This means you have to have the home inspection, any follow-up inspections that your buyer wants to pursue. If there's any estimates that you have to get that detailing what work might be done or what it might cost to get some things fixed, you have to have all of that completed and any negotiations with the seller as to how things might be remedied or cured within those 12 days. So this is a really important deadline that people sometimes don't realize how fast it can come up. And sometimes they forget too that you have to have all of those additional follow-up inspections and estimates and what have you, that all needs to be done within these 12 days. So my suggestion to you is if you have a buyer that's writing an offer and they'd like to have a home inspection, what I do is before I submit the offer, I'll actually call a home inspector or two to see if they have availability within like 1 or 2 days. So then I can say, you know what, we've got 2 home inspectors on the ready to come into the home. If the offer's accepted, I can get the home inspection done quickly. So it's always best practice to get that home inspection scheduled sooner versus than later, in order for you to give yourself some time to have any follow-ups. So in line 216 here, we're giving the seller the right to cure the home inspection. And if you ever have questions about a document, 99.9% of the time, the answer is right there in front of you in the document. So if the seller has the right to cure, they can satisfy the contingency by delivering a notice to the buyer. I put within 2 days after the buyer's delivery of the notice of defects stating the seller's election to cure. They can cure the defects in a good and workmanlike manner, and they can deliver to the buyer a written report delivering the work that is going to get done. Now, before this even happens, you're most likely going to have discussions with the other party, with the listing agent, to try to understand. Well, first, you're going to understand what's most important to the buyer in terms of anything that comes up in the home inspection. You are going to see if there's ways in which you could have the work done, if that's something that your buyer wants. Another way a seller could cure defects is to reduce the purchase price or give a closing cost credit. But those types of details and that agreement must be made and specified in the form of an amendment. So the amendment is signed by both parties. Now, say you're at a stalemate and you can't come to terms with how things are going to be fixed. This is where the notice comes into play. So we actually have many, many, many contract trainings that are all about the home inspection contingency and what it means to deliver a notice, what it means to deliver an amendment. So if you aren't quite sure as to, or you don't have enough confidence in how the home inspection process works, I'll actually go on to this. We have a sheet on our KW Realty MKE. If you go into the agent hub, you go all the way down to new associate resources to the PC resources section. Here we have one-sheeters that are based on specific topics, the most frequently asked questions that we get. And it actually will show you, if I click on the home inspection, here are all links to videos on our YouTube channel pertaining to the home inspection, understanding the contingency. What does it mean to define a defect? How to resolve the inspection contingency. So, we give you guys so many resources as it pertains to contracts and getting comfortable with what's included in the offer documents. So please, please watch these training videos. If you still have questions, by all means, call the helpline, call the compliance broker. You can call me. But we're relying on you guys to really become more confident by leveraging the resources that you already have at your disposal. Sometimes you just don't know where to get them. So we got a ton of stuff here. Okay, I'm going to go down back into the offer. So we know that Malik also wanted to get a radon inspection. And now home inspectors, many of them can do both a home inspection and a radon test together. So a home inspector would do the home inspection. They would actually leave a radon test kind of machine or a kit in the basement of the home. I believe that has to stay in the home for like 24 or 48 hours to be able to monitor the radon levels. So what happens the majority of the times when both contingencies are included in the offer, the deadline for radon typically is the same deadline as the home inspection. So if we go up here one more time just to double check, we said our home inspection contingency was going to be due in 12 days. We've got the radon test also being satisfied within 12 days as well. At the top of page 5, this section indicates who is going to cure if something happens or something comes up in the radon test. And it, again, in a seller's market, it is very common for buyers to give the seller the right to cure. So that's what we've done here. We've crossed out shall not. So seller shall have the right to cure. And just for your own knowledge, if a radon test does come back high, radon abatement systems, so things that get installed to remove the radon, those can cost anywhere between like $1,200 to $1,500. So it's more common right now than not to have the seller make that type of cure. But when what might be nice is not even including the contingency, and your buyer take that on themselves when they get in the home after closing. So But just something to keep in mind, if you do have a radon test, it typically follows the same time frame as the home inspection. I'm going to do a quick pause before we get into financing. Does anybody have any questions? Nope. Okay.
Not right now.
Okay. So I am now going to open up my handy dandy mortgage calculator to help me fill in the financing section. So before we go do that though, I'm just going to go back to our offer document and review again what our buyer Malik had in terms of his pre-approval. So we know from a budget perspective, if we're offering the 179.9, that fits within his budget. He's been pre-approved for up to $180,000. He is going to get an FHA loan. He's going to put 5% down, and we're going to use a mortgage rate of 6.5%. So when I come over here to the offer, we're making this offer contingent on our buyer getting a loan. So I've checked the box. The offer is contingent upon the buyer being able to obtain a written blank loan. So this is where you would type in the type of loan that your buyer is getting. So Malik is going to get an FHA. If he was a veteran and wanted to get a VA loan, you would put VA in this line. If he was getting a standard 30-year conventional loan, you would put 30-year conventional. So this is in line 249. This is the type of loan that he is going to get. So again, loan type or specific lender, if any. So we're going to try to get that loan commitment within blank days after acceptance of this offer. So this is definitely a deadline that I would be picking up the phone and calling his lender to make sure that if I'm going to put 21 days, we're going to deliver the loan commitment within 21 days. I want to make sure that the lender can accommodate that deadline. So it's totally acceptable and highly recommended that you pick up the phone and call the buyer's lender just to confirm that some of these deadlines can be met. So after we called his lender, they said, yep, 21 days for a loan commitment, not a problem. The financing selected shall be in an amount of not less than blank. Does anyone know what this number in line 251 represents? Ooh, we got somebody chatting.
The total minus the down payment.
Correct. The total purchase price minus the down payment. So if I open up my handy dandy mortgage calculator, I'm putting in the purchase price, which is $179,000. I'm putting that, they're putting 5% down. 5% is $8,995. So if I take $179,900 minus the down payment, that gets me to this amount right here, $179,005. This is the amount of the loan. Does everyone track with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
What was that? Yep. Okay, cool. Now here in line 251, we also have to talk about how many years is the loan going to be for and over what number of years will it be amortized. So typically if it's a conventional type loan or a FHA loan or a VA loan, these numbers here on the line 251 are usually the same. It's going to be a term of 30 years, not less than 30 years, or amortized not less than 30 years. If you have an adjustable rate mortgage, an ARM, that can be different. So if your buyer is getting an ARM, what I would do is pick up the phone and call the listing agent just to confirm some of the numbers that you want to be putting into the offer. They can certainly help remove any mystery as to what needs to be put in there and give you the confidence you need, knowing that what you're putting in the offer is actually the type of loan and the details that the buyer and the lender have discussed. So I've left this number blank. So here in line 252, this is the amount that the buyer is going to be paying every month for their loan principal and interest. So if we know that we had 5% down, we know that our interest rate we were going to use is 6.5%. Does anybody have what monthly principal and interest amount might go in line 252?
$1,080.24.
That's it. Yep, $1,080.24. I would probably just round it to like 1081, but we'll put in the specific amount. Okay? So again, this amount represents just the principal and interest, just their loan. The buyer acknowledges that the lender's required payments may also include taxes, a 12th of the taxes, hazard insurance, PMI. So sometimes buyers see this number and they think that's a lot less than what I was budgeting. That's because this only represents their loan. It doesn't include the monthly amount of taxes that they have to also pay each month, homeowners insurance, etc. Okay, going down into line 264, we are getting an FHA loan, which is a fixed rate loan, meaning the interest rate does not change from year to year. So the annual interest rate shall not exceed, and I just put 6.5%. It's in kind of a more volatile market in terms of interest rates if they're changing quite quickly or quite frequently. It's okay to ask the lender where their interest rates are at the time of the offer. And I would probably bump them up just a little bit to give yourself a little bit of a cushion in the event something changes. But for our practice today, we're going to use 6.5. If your buyer was getting an adjustable rate mortgage or an ARM, you would be checking this box. And this is where you would get this lender's help understanding how is that rate going to change over the duration of the term. Okay. So I'm going to scroll on down. And again, I don't cover all the specifics in the offer. We have so many contract trainings on YouTube that really go through the different sections. So if you want more insight and practice or just more knowledge about the financing section, there's over 100 videos on our YouTube channel in our contract training playlist. I bet you 10 to 15 of them are all about financing. So on line 288, I've indicated that seller financing is not applicable to our offer. Seller financing is something where maybe the seller is actually going to help the buyer and give them the loan versus a lender. Anytime you don't want to have something included in your offer, rather than leaving the box blank, it's best practice to put NA. So I put NA here. Moving up to page 6, if we had a cash buyer and they didn't want to and didn't need to get financing, we would be filling in this line here, talking about offers not contingent on financing. Within blank days of the acceptance, the buyer needs to deliver a proof of funds. So we don't have to fill this out because our buyer is getting a loan. Oh, I already found a mistake. Okay, this is good. Our buyer is getting an appraisal contingency. So this doesn't mean that we're giving the buyer the okay to have an appraisal. What the appraisal contingency allows us to do is try to negotiate with the seller if the appraised value comes in less than the purchase price. So let's just read this quickly. The offer is contingent upon the buyer or the buyer's lender having the property appraised at the buyer's expense. And it talks about who does that. And they're going to issue an appraisal report that's dated subsequent to the date stated on line 1. So it's going to be dated. The appraisal has to happen after today's date. And in that report, it might indicate the appraised value for the property is equal to or greater than the agreed upon purchase price. The contingency shall be deemed satisfied unless buyer within blank days, I'm going to leave that blank for now, after acceptance delivers to the seller a copy of the appraisal report indicating that the appraised value is less than the agreed upon purchase price. Okay, so if you have an appraisal done and say in our example, an appraiser came in and said the house is worth $185,000. So that's $5,000 more than what we were offering. All you have to do in that example is tell the listing agent the appraisal has come back and the value is good. We're moving forward. You shouldn't send them a copy of the appraisal report, and you shouldn't tell them how much it actually appraised for. What happens sometimes is when people do that, then the listing agent tells the seller, and the seller is disappointed because now they're selling their house for less than what the bank said that it was worth. So if the value, on the flip side, say the appraiser comes in and the appraiser says this house is only worth $175,000. Well, we're offering $179,900. So we've got a gap here. By checking the box in this or in the offer and including this contingency, we're giving our seller an opportunity to cure, meaning we might ask them to drop the price. Maybe both parties will meet in the middle to make up the difference. But what this box does is indicates if the value comes in low, we're going to be more than likely trying to negotiate a reduction in price. Typically, the appraisal contingency deadline matches or is pretty close to when your financing commitment is due. The financing commitment is dependent on having the appraisal all agreed upon. So if our loan was due in 21 days, I'm actually just going to give ourselves a few extra days and I'm going to say we want our appraisal done within 18 days. We're going to give the seller the right to cure. So I'm going to fill this in. And the seller can satisfy the contingency by delivering notice to the buyer, either adjusting the purchase price, or they can object to it. So I usually don't leave this line blank. I don't think it's necessary to give the seller 5 full days to make a decision on whether or not the purchase price is going to be adjusted, because we've been in nice open communication with the other party. I would probably just give them a day or two max. Again, there's a whole contract training that's all about financing and all about the appraisal contingency. So please, if you aren't confident about this section in the offer, please go watch those videos. Okay, moving on. Box 328 was not checked because if it was, this means that the buyer has to close. Maybe they currently live in a house. In order to buy their next house, they have to sell the house that they're currently in. So that's called a home sale contingency. So we don't have that situation here. And usually if there's a home sale contingency included with the offer, there is, it might be accompanied by a bump clause. So again, like if you aren't quite sure what's all in a bump clause, go to the contract training playlist. We've got things all about home sale contingencies and bump clause. This is, Malik is writing an offer to be put into the primary position. So if, say, the seller accepted another offer and they're under contract, but are maybe interested in accepting a secondary offer, meaning it's okay to have an offer kind of in the background and waiting in the wings in case the primary offer falls through, your buyer would know if they were in fact writing as a secondary offer. So I've listed this here as NA because it's not applicable. The next section here is talking about proration. So how are things like taxes, expenses, HOA fees, municipal charges, how are those going to get divvied up between the buyer and the seller? And I've checked box 366, meaning in terms of taxes, everything is going to be prorated on a daily basis using the 2023, the preceding year's tax rates. This is an important box to check. Either this is the option or you've got some other options too, but this is something that the title company will review, and then the title company will help calculate how much a seller is responsible for in terms of taxes, assessments, et cetera, and then how much money the buyer is going to be responsible for. So if you have questions about this specific tax proration section, please give the helpline a call, or you can call Joan or Steph, or you could call me. The next section in the offer talks about title, and this just indicates that the seller is responsible for providing a title policy to the buyer. And it talks about what all that means, how we're going to deliver the title, what happens if the title isn't free of any judgments or liens. Maybe there's some type of lawsuit happening that the seller is included in that would be shown potentially on the title. So this whole section talks about what happens in those types of situations. So please make sure that you familiarize yourself with that. Sometimes title can be a little bit of a mystery. When I first started, one of the first partners that I called was a title company, and I just had them walk me through, what does title mean? Like who's involved in the title process? So it's always good to rely on people that are specialists in that area. If you have questions or you want to learn a little bit more, by all means, call them directly. Title companies and lenders, they're more than happy to sit down and talk to people about what it is that they do, the process, and how they can help. I'm going to go down here. These are a bunch of definitions. Don't have to include that. And again, please make sure that you just familiarize yourself with all the sections of the offer. That's your job to know what's included and be able to review with your clients and answer any questions that they have. I'm just going to go right on down then to page 10 and line 543. So this is one of those new sections coming out of the changes that the NAR has required. So in line 543, I've checked the box indicating that the seller agrees to pay the buyer's firm 2.4% of the purchase price towards the buyer's brokerage. So again, this is something where I called the listing agent. He told me that the seller was offering 2.4% to the buyer's agent, and the listing agent said, please just include it in the offer. So we did. Now, if your buyer wants to pay for your commission, again, make sure that you have some type of buyer agency document signed, but maybe to make your offer more attractive, and if your buyer has the cash to do so, you don't have to check this box. You don't have to ask the seller to pay for your commission, but that's part of your offer strategy that you should be discussing with your buyers during your buyer consultations. So just something to keep in mind. And then in terms of additional provisions, so this is a boilerplate information that automatically gets added into your zip form template. So if any deadline expires on a Saturday, Sunday, federal or state holiday, that deadline automatically extends to the next business day. The only deadline that doesn't pertain to is binding acceptance. Binding acceptance can happen any day of the year. Easter, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, it doesn't matter. And then again, I've indicated that the seller is not providing a condition report. So I've listed here, if we were going to be personally delivering any documents, I just put the listing agent's name here, my name here for the buyer's recipient, but we're going to be primarily using email for our document delivery. So I put the listing agent's email address here, my email address here. And then we also have some addendum that are going to be included within our offer. So addenda A, addendum S, and then GMAR addendum AC, which we'll go over quickly. And then this is something that I see people forget to put in their offer all the time, and that's their name and their brokerage. Because being the last line on this page, sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle. So just don't forget to do that. And then it's already filled in our buyer's name. So that was a quick rundown of the offer. I'm now going to go into, and while I open up addendum A, does anybody have questions about the offer? Okay. Addendum A. This addendum is used to request additional testing. It might be for like asbestos, or if it's on public or private well water, or if there's a private sanitary system. This is the document that you can use to include some of those additional tests. It's also an opportunity if you want to get a seller's closing credit. This is the section that you would use to fill in. But for our offer today, this document really is doing two things for us. One, it's indicating that we're going to include the request to have a home warranty. That home warranty shall not exceed blank dollars. So usually like the standard home warranty plan for like a 1 year plan coverage is about $500. So I've just put that the cost shouldn't exceed $500. The cost of the warranty will be paid by the seller at closing. You could say that the buyer is going to pay for it too. It's totally up to you. Just make sure that your buyer is aware of the cost. If neither is crossed out, it's automatically the seller will pay for it. Then the warranty plan will be ordered by either the listing firm or the selling firm, which is you. Usually I have the listing firm. If the seller's paying for it, usually I have the listing firm order the home warranty. Okay. Now, the rest of the items here are marked as not applicable. There's no association fee. We're not going to do any additional testing. We're not going to have the well water tested or the well tested itself because it doesn't have a well. It's a municipal water. And we're not going to have the private sanitary system tested because it's on municipal sewer. But there are some additional things here in Addendum A that provide just some additional insight and protections to a buyer. So make sure that you review and are familiar with what's included. If your buyer was getting a VA loan, you would be checking the box here indicating some additional terms to the VA contingency. And again, here are just some things in terms of statements and definitions, but just review to make sure you understand things about zoning restrictions, underground storage tanks, what happens if the house is in a floodplain. So again, make sure you read these documents. And then the only other line that we're checking in this box is line 203. We're including the lead-based paint addendum. So that's also included within our offer. The last thing that you need to fill out on this document then is information pertaining to you, the buyer's agent. So you put in your firm address, the firm license number is already populated in zip forms for you, your name, your license number, email address, and phone number. And then you also have to do the same thing for the seller side. So all of this information is pertaining to the listing office or the listing agent, and you can get all of this information off of MLS. It's all right here. So I'm going to hit save. And then the final document that we're going to include in our offer is Addendum AC. An Addendum AC is used in, there's 3 different sections to this document. It helps cover if the buyer is willing to take on some repairs themselves for the home inspection. It covers if there's going to be some appraisal gap coverage, meaning the buyer would be willing to cover a portion of the difference if the home doesn't appraise at the value that the buyer is offering. It also then can be used if the buyer is including an escalation clause. So if you don't know what an escalation clause is, again, we have lots of training videos on what that all entails. But for our practice today, the only thing that we are including in this document is the inspection contingency. So this is where we're going to use a little bit of money that Malik had. He had $5,000 again, and that needed to be used for earnest money or some inspection coverages or an appraisal gap. We're going to use it for the inspection. So what this states here is the buyer agrees not to submit any notice of defect or an amendment for repairs, replacement credit, or price reduction under the inspection contingency in the offer, unless the cumulated estimated cost to repair will replace the defects identified exceeds $1,000. So this means, and this is what makes this section more attractive to the seller when a buyer includes a home inspection contingency. This means that the buyer is going to have their home inspection, and maybe there are some defects that need to be repaired or replaced, or that the buyer wants to have repaired or replaced. The buyer is willing to take on the first $1,000 worth of repairs. So they're not going to go to the seller and say, hey, I want, X, Y, and Z fix. It's going to cost $1,000. No, the buyer is willing to take on the cost to make those repairs, which they would then do after closing. If there are defects or things that cost more than $1,000, that's when the seller enters the picture here. And if your buyer wants to pursue any type of repair or replacement that exceeds $1,000, this is where that comes into play. So estimates, this is also very important. Estimates of cost to repair things, you need to be able to show a true legitimate estimate from a qualified professional. You can't just guess as to what something might cost to be fixed. You need to get legitimate estimates. So that indicates here, estimates will be obtained. The seller agrees to give the buyer and those people access to the home in order to get the estimates, and that the buyer, if there's any costs associated with getting an estimate, that's going to be on the buyer. Now, this also, I haven't checked this box. This would give the seller the right as well to have estimates that they would gather on their own. Usually I would check that box, but I just didn't today. I don't want them to get their own estimates. I want to be able to use ours. But I've checked this box here indicating that either party can extend that contingency deadline by blank days, 5 days. I'm going to even put it in here. So if you need additional time to get that home inspection contingency satisfied, this allows you to extend the deadline to get that information. In order to do so, either party may do this by delivering written notice of an extension, if delivered to the other party prior to that original deadline on the inspection contingency. So say you're running around and you're waiting for one more estimate and they can't get in there until 2 days after the current deadline. This allows you to automatically extend that original deadline by 5 days. In order to do that, though, you have to deliver a written notice indicating you're extending the deadline. Make sense? And that's all you need to put in addendum AC. So I strongly suggest you guys, and I'm gonna take this off of share. Please do your own practice and send it to me as if you were submitting a real offer. So the documents that you would include, and you would include them as one PDF, not multiple PDFs, would be the offer, addendum AC, addendum A. You also would be including addendum S, the lead paint. If the seller would have provided a condition report, you would also include a condition report within your offer packet. So that's all combined, as well as a pre-approval letter from your lender into one document. And then email me your practice offer and pretend like I'm that listing agent and put a nice cover letter or a summary in the body of the email indicating some of the headlines of the offer. So if anybody has questions, by all means, let me know. But I look forward to seeing you guys put some practice offers together. I hope you do it. Okay.